Hello, friends. My name is Daniel Fontenot, and welcome again to Jewels of Truth. There is a Catholic Marxist Trojan horse coming into America. Let me explain. I want to read a few scriptures. In Acts chapter 20, verses 29 through 31, the Apostle Paul told us, "For I know this, that after my departure shall grievous wolves enter in among you, not sparing the flock. Also of your own selves shall men arise, speaking perverse things to draw away disciples after them. Therefore watch, and remember that by the space of 3 years I ceased not to warn every one night and day with tears." So, in a sense, you can say this is an example of a Trojan horse. You have grievous wolves entering in among you, not sparing the flock. And these come of their own selves, it says, among the people of the church. We also have 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 21. 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 1. "But there were false prophets also among the people, even as there were false prophets or false teachers among you, who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Lord that bought them, and bring upon themselves swift destruction." So you have false teachers coming into the church. They're acting like they're pretending to be Christians, but they are grievous wolves. And one more scripture from Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7 and verse 15. "Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves." Okay? Jesus has warned us. Paul has warned us. Peter has warned us. Now, if you have not viewed the previous video, this is sort of like a little mini-series here, I would encourage you to go back one or two, actually two videos, and you will see how that the Vatican was involved in encouraging the South to split from the North in the Civil War. Okay? The Pope of Rome encouraged that split. And he has a lot of blood on his hands that he will have to answer for in the judgment. Now, in the last video, we showed how the Roman Catholic Church, mainly the Pope, the Vatican, they were so successful that they encouraged the Catholics in the North to either desert the army or not to join at all. Okay? If you want to understand that, then go back and watch the two previous videos. But I'm not going to read all that again. I'm going to read the last part of the paragraph that I read last time. "The point to be made here," and this again is a book. I'm reading here from a book by Avril Manhattan. He was a writer for the BBC many years ago, and this book was written in 1982. Note that date, that year. Been 41 years ago. Okay? "The point to be made here," he says, "is not only the historical one that the Vatican intervened in the agonies of the Civil War, of the American Civil War, but that in a different context and in a different way, it can do the same in today's conflicts, be they military or political, and even more so in the future." Avril Manhattan continues in his chapter here, "A Catholic Marxist Trojan Horse." "Catholics in the United States, as well as elsewhere in the world, can and will obey the dicta of future pontiffs as they have done in the past. This observation is even truer in our time than in the past, since contemporary popes, by sponsoring doctrines which are socially subversive. Is there a pope now that is sponsoring doctrines that are socially subversive? Absolutely. But wrapped in Catholic demands for economic and social justice. Does the current pope believe in social justice? Quote unquote, yes. Are in effect fostering a form of socialism which could be a greater menace to the traditional American ideals than the Vatican's support of the South in the past century. If during the American Civil War, the Vatican could exercise an influence in the internal affairs of the United States quite disproportionate to the number of Catholics in America at that time, less than 6% of the total population, what could it do now with 55 million faithful, or more than a quarter of the country's total population? It is a considered question worthy of a carefully considered answer, unprejudiced, concrete, and precise. For, notwithstanding arguments and protests to the contrary, the Catholic Church is not just another American denomination, a mistaken idea that most U.S. Protestants have accepted since the advent of ecumenism. The Roman Church is still as peculiarly unique to herself as ever. And I have gotten comments on some of these videos, and some saying, oh, the Catholic Church, it is a thing of the past, it's irrelevant. Okay? This is what one commenter said, it's irrelevant. This proves completely the opposite. Today, the Marxist-oriented encyclicals of the Supreme Pontiffs can inspire millions of American Catholics, even if reluctantly, to accept subtly subversive tenets that are anathema to traditional and cherished American polity. Now, if I have time in this video, and I know a lot of you probably already know this. If you are Catholic, you probably already know this. But this current Pope, he is admonishing American Catholics. Basically, he's saying, I'm not quoting him verbatim, but he is saying to Catholics, you need to just get over it and just accept these LGBTQ people in your churches. Okay? Add to that the radical forces, both secular and Protestant leftist, at present working towards the same political ends, and it will be seen that capitalist America is in actual danger of real disintegration. And it's very obvious that many can see right now that America is in actual danger of real disintegration, more so now than when Avro Manhattan wrote this book in 1982, 41 years ago. In the days to come, a serious dilemma will confront loyal, patriotic American Catholics, at least those who are sufficiently educated and aware of the covert political attacks being made upon their country's government and institutions under the guise of religion. They will have to re-examine their allegiance to the hierarchy of a church which has been allied with a subversive ideology, communism. And it's very obvious that, yes, communism is coming into this country, but what people are not seeing is that this is in large part coming from the Pope of Rome. What is the religious persuasion of the current President of the United States? And what has the Pope said to him when he has gone to visit the Pope at the Vatican? This could not be otherwise, because in future the teaching of their church will no longer be inspired by a single gospel, but by a hybrid one. Now, I don't agree that the Catholic Church ever taught the gospel, but be that as it may, again, Avro Manhattan says, this could not be otherwise because in future the teaching of their church will no longer be inspired by a single gospel, but by a hybrid one consisting of the gospel of Jesus Christ grafted to the gospel of Karl Marx. And this is what the Christian church did centuries ago. This is how the Catholic Church was formed, by a combination or a union of Christianity and paganism. Only this time it's by, it's combining the Catholic so-called gospel with Marxism. The outcome hangs in doubt. Many American Catholics, if given the hard choice between the new Catholic Church, so alien to the church of their upbringing, and allegiance to their country and the ideals it represents, might well rebel against Rome, just as Archbishop Lefebvre and his followers have done. A too progressive Vatican, forcing the issues too fast and too soon, could thus precipitate a schism in the American church as deeper, if not deeper, than the political split between the countries north and south in 1860. The Vatican is well aware of this danger and is promoting a policy of exceptional gradualism and subtle ideological circumspection. The possibility that the progressive elements of the Catholic Church, acting as a colossal Trojan horse, could be used to weaken the internal stability of America is not a flight of alarmistic fantasy, nor is it an unjustified political speculation. For if and when Europe has been transformed into a solidly Marxist, Catholic-oriented continent, the double pressure from a combined Euro-Soviet political system could compel the Church to overstep her original self-imposed strategical limits vis-a-vis the United States. This could spell open conflict. The United States, surrounded by Marxist continents and Marxist nations, will then have to cope not only with a communist-dominated world outside its borders, but also with the two most expansionistic doctrines of the century from within as well, Marxism and Catholicism allied. Dear people, the people of the United States need to open their eyes, because this is what we're seeing in this country. Marxism and Catholicism allied. The signs are already there for all to see. And remember, Averell Manhattan wrote this in 1982. Europe is becoming more Marxist motivated every day. Black Africa has become a boiling cauldron of communist dictatorship in action. Asia, encompassing almost half of mankind, is already largely Marxist. Latin America is swinging from the juntas of the extreme right to the juntas of the extreme left. The failure of several left-wing dictatorships in South America should not encourage complacency. Evidently, that's what was going on in 1982. The efforts will be repeated as they are being repeated now in Asia and Africa. And with each coup, the communist conspiracy is gaining strength. If the past is an indication of the future, Marxist Cuba, securely planted at the doorstep of the United States and allowed to take firm root there, is a portent of things to come for the whole of the Western Hemisphere. And I read many years ago, I've read it more than once, that actually Fidel Castro was a Jesuit. And I don't doubt it. Marxist Cuba was conceived and brought to birth by distant Soviet Russia, which has sustained that offspring ever since. Cuban guerrillas and military ventures directed at setting up Marxist regimes in Africa, the Middle East, and elsewhere were but the forerunners of similar ones to be established in Latin America when the time is ripe. It is not owing to a fortuitous whim of history that Cuba is the most militarily powerful communist administration in the Americas, nor that she remains under the direct protection of the Russian nuclear umbrella. This is before the Soviet Union fell in 1989. Neither should it ever be forgotten that it was Marxist Cuba which brought down the United States and Soviet Russia to the very brink of nuclear war during the missile crisis of 1963. Today, the outlook for America is even darker when viewed objectively and apart from the cheerful optimism with which Americans face the future, even when such optimism is least justified. Unless events of extraordinary magnitude occur, and assuming that Europe has finally become a Catholic communist-dominated continent, and further, that successive American administrations continue to belittle the internal danger of political and political religious subversion, then the approaching decades will surely witness one certain event: the steady decline and the eventual collapse of American civilization as we know it today. And he wrote this in 1982. Avril Manhattan, the writer for the BBC, who has passed away years ago, he was almost a prophet. He was, because what he is saying in this chapter, it is beginning to happen. And Americans need to pay attention to what Avril Manhattan calls Marxism and Catholicism allied. And again, this is from the book, The Vatican-Moscow-Washington Alliance. And it has been the habit of the Vatican that when it can't use one government to its advantage, it turns to another government. This is what it is doing. And it will use the United States, and it is using the United States to a large degree. Okay, so if you enjoy this content, if you agree with this presentation, then by all means, tap that like button and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, then please post them at the bottom of this video. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day.